how pleasant for friends to dwell together, to come together to recover the gift of spiritual community, to renew our faith that there is holiness and goodness and beauty in life, to recall the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flames of memory and hope, that we may also renew the vision of an earth made fair and all her people one. With such hope in our hearts, we lift our voices in song to bless this hour as we begin our hour of worship together, singing together all whose boasted. Oh, excuse me, my choir is going to sing first. Golly, you can tell I'm distracted. Wow, too many good things in my brain. Forgive me, I'm wrong. You're going to sing a great hymn. Dudes, I'm impressed. Thank you so much. Thank you for yelling. I appreciate that. Good morning. I'm so glad to see you, and I crave your forgiveness for walking all over the choir, but they rose to the occasion and put me in my place. But I'm going to put you in your place now. I'm Fred Wooden. I'm your preacher this morning, and this is Fountain Street Church, a liberal church for almost 150 years here in Grand Rapids, a place that tries to live the text you just sang about rising to the challenges of liberty and freedom in a world that frequently wishes to make them more difficult and deprive them from others, which makes us a bit harrowing to some people out there. Every now and then someone says, "That's not a real church." And I'm entitled to say, but I rarely say, "And yours is?" But we won't go there. We prefer to haunt the fears of others. But we need to be haunted from time to time as well. From time out of mind, in fact, our young people have brought us the spirit of Halloween on their own. And from year to year, we rejoice in their Halloween-like spirit. And so this morning, as we have from years in and years out, we invite them to present their spookiest selves as they come and bless us with their presence through the famous March of the Goblins. Look at all of you guys. And I'm looking at such a variety of different people. Isn't it fun when you put on a costume, you're kind of a different person? And that's part of the fun. You get to become someone else. Or maybe you get to be just like yourself, but you didn't show it before. Think about that. We all kind of hide a little bit of ourselves. We keep our buttons buttoned and we don't say certain things that are in our head. But when you put on a costume, you can let all of yourself out. And it's okay because people kind of expect it to come out like that. So the funny part is you got a costume on, but you're all you inside of that. I love that part. I should wear a costume myself sometimes, I think. But look, I see all the colors of the rainbow. When you think about it, isn't that what we're about at Fountain Street Church? All the different kinds of people, and young, and tall, and wide, and narrow, and people with all sorts of faces. Even without costumes, all your faces are different, aren't they? And now they just look more different than they did before. Would you trade your face for someone else? Nah. Even in the costume, you want to keep the face you got. That is the greatest part about Fountain Street Church. You get to be you, and no one can stop you from doing that. Isn't that the coolest thing? Sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes if you're at school, or maybe with your friends, they want you to be somebody else or like something else, or not be you, but be this or that. But at Fountain Street Church, you get to be yourself. Hey, even more important, you must be yourself. That's the only rule at Fountain Street Church. You got to be you. It was Oscar Wilde who said, always be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Be you. With the costumes. Are you scared? Do you want to scare other people? No. There you go. I'm with you. But sometimes we're startled by how different someone can be. What is the startling part? It means that we're seeing something we didn't see before. Are there parts of you that other people don't know that if they saw them they'd be startled? Like, oops, I didn't know that? I'll bet there are. So when we're scared, it's because we learned something brand new that we weren't ready to know before. So I want you to startle people from time to time. Not to spook them to make them unhappy, but to make them go, oh, I didn't know that. So I'm really glad you came to bring your whole selves here today. And I want all of you grown-up people who are not in costumes to be as brave as these guys. And be yourself out loud a little more often. Because the world needs us to be ourselves, not what other people want us to be. So you are very brave people. You are the leaders today. And so we thank you. We, the grown-ups who sit around in our conventional clothing with our conventional conversation, are excited for you, and we want to be like you when we grow up. Yeah, we do. So we're all going to grab a hold of our inner Halloweeny and let go of it so that we can be with you today and tomorrow. So I put my blessing upon you, because all these people give me the authority to put blessings on people. Bless you and you and you and you, all the witch-like people and the monstrous people and the super people and the ghostly people and the angelic people and all the other people I cannot understand because you look so different. I like that you're all here. Bless you, bless you, bless you. You know what bless you means? It means I look at you and say, you're wonderful. Do you think they're wonderful? I think they're wonderful. And so it is my expectation that you will follow their example and be a little startling when you become your real self in front of somebody who didn't know all about you. Thank you for being our leaders today. And thank you as you leave this room, taking our spirit with you. And thank you to the green person over there, otherwise known as John Moskowski. You make the place really work today. So, Miss Marilyn, is it possible that Miss Marilyn Osenchuk can give you music that will help you leave with the same joy that you entered the room? I hope so. I'm waiting. I am really grateful to a member of the church who last Sunday after service, when I was in the kitchen pouring an extra little bit of coffee, found me and said, Fred, I want to thank you, which is always lovely to hear, about your words about praying. For those who don't know, if you're not a Fountain Streeter, praying is a little awkward for us. A lot of us are saying, like, why? I grew up in the Unitarian faith, and the joke is that when we pray to whom it may concern. But that diminishes the reality that ambiguity matters. And if you don't hold this notion of a celestial puppet master or stage manager kind of pulling the strings or putting the players in play, then what is this praying thing all about? Now, anyway, to get back to the fellow who talked to me, he said, you've mentioned two things that help me understand what prayer can mean to me as a non-theistic person. You mentioned once it is listening. It is. Not just for that, but for that. Who you are at that moment. How many voices are in your head right now that are saying, do this, think that, feel that, go that way, and being able to at least listen to all the voices is important. Otherwise, it's just babble. So listening. Praying is listening with some intention. The other word I used that he liked was longing. We want lots of things. I want to eat a lot of Halloween candy. I long to win the lottery, whatever those. And going beneath those to the longings that are the thing that make your heart beat. I'm going to add a third one now. This will be kind of odd. Leaning. In this case, being willing to depend upon something other than yourself. In other words, can you give up a little bit of your personal strength so that you can lean on something? Now, some would say lean on God. That's fine if you want to do that. But being willing to say, I am me, but I need help from time to time getting through the day. I need to lean on. And I want to know that I can lean on you, us, hope. I'll get to that in a minute when I talk about the psalm for today and the sermon. But I want you to consider that prayer is looking for a place you can lean on that will hold you up when you feel weak. I'm not saying what that is. That really is your choice. And so with that in mind, let's try it. I'm feeling unsteady today. Maybe it's age, it could be illness, it could just be a little bit of uncertainty, but I could sure use a little help. And if not a little help, just a place to rest for a little while, a place where I can take the weight off of my soul. I'm looking for a place to lean. Perhaps it's a memory of a time when I felt strong and connected, loved. Perhaps it is a hope for something that I'm working on, that it will produce a good, a pleasure, a satisfaction. Perhaps it's a person. But I come into this house every week needing to lean on something, someone. And I'm here to confess that I cannot stand on my own 2 feet all the time, that sometimes I need to lean against something else. I don't need an answer today, but I need someone somehow to know that it's okay if I lean on something for a while. I pray that you and I together can lean on each other as we walk through the days of our lives. That we can lean on each other's hope and care. That we can lean on our dreams, even when they seem distant. That we can lean on our moments of beauty and truth and goodness when we have to climb the steep slopes. I pray to lean and to be held up when I need to be held up. Upon these things, which are always in our hearts, we devote ourselves now in that prayer that can only be felt fully in the presence of silence. And so may it be. You're going to hear the coolest piece of music now. It is so much fun because sometimes humor is what we lean on to get through the day. So we're going to get a little bit of merriment out of all this Reformation madness. And I hope you enjoy it as much as they enjoy singing it.
When I was just ein junger man, I studied canon law. Though Erfurt was a challenge, it was just to please my pa. Then came the storm, the lightning struck, I called upon St. Anne. I shaved my head, I took my vows, and Augustinian. Oh,
papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation. Speak your mind against them all, face excommunication. Nail your theses to the door and start a reformation. Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation.
When Tetzel came near Wittenberg, St. Peter's prophet soared. So I wrote a little message for the bulletin board. You cannot purchase merit, for we're justified by grace. Here's 95 more reasons, Brother Tetzel, in your face.
Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation. Speak your mind against them all, face excommunication. Nail your theses to the wall and start a reformation. Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation.
They loved my tracts, adored my wit, all were exemplar. So, however, hauled me up before the emperor. Are these your books, will you recant? King Charles did demand. I will not change my dieter, God help me, here I stand.
Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation. Speak your mind against them all, face excommunication. Nail your theses to the wall and start a reformation. Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation.
Duke Frederick took the wise approach, responding to my words by knighting George's hostage in the kingdom of the birds. Use Brother Martin's model as the languages you seek. Stay locked inside the castle with your Hebrew and your Greek.
Oh, papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation. Speak your mind against them and face excommunication. Nail your theses to the door, let's start a reformation. Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation.
Let's raise our Steins and Concord books together in this place and spread the word that Catholic is spelled with lowercase. The word remains unfettered when the Spirit gets a chance. So come on, Katie, drop your lute and join us in our dance. Oh,
Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation. Speak your mind against them all, face excommunication. Nail your feces to the Lord and start a reformation. Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation. Papal bulls, indulgences, and transubstantiation.
Gentlemen, that was supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And I think we're done here, don't you think? They gave us quite the lesson this morning, but even so, there are other words that would be gilding the lily or painting the lily, but I'm going to do it anyway. And as I do every week, I lift up the names of those whose lives were completed at this time in years past, who by their words and deeds built this house and gave us this community and lived this faith that we share. I lift up the names of Eileen Goddard and Jack Rice, of Dick Brooks and Audrey Walters, John Rossi and Ted McDonald, Joyce Teasdale, Gladys Ryan, Marvin Stahl, Genevieve Buckingham, and Mary Maguki, all of whom came to the end of their lives at this time in years past. And so we honor them with this prayer of ancient times. El Malay Rachamim, God filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens heights, bring proper rest beneath the winds of your Shekhinah to the souls of our beloved and our blameless who went to their eternal place of rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath the wings of your wings eternally. Bind their souls to you and to we the living, that we may be at peace, that they may rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Psalm 46. God is our refuge and stronghold, a very help in trouble. Therefore we are not afraid, though the earth reels, though mountains topple into the sea, though waters rage and foam, swell the mountains quake. There is a river whose streams gladden God's city and the holy dwelling place of the Most High. God is there in its midst and will not be toppled. By daybreak God will come to its aid. Nations rage, kingdoms topple. At the sound of his thunder the earth dissolves. The God of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our haven. Come see what God has done, how God has wrought desolation on the earth, who puts a stop to wars throughout the earth, breaking the bow, snapping the spear, consigning wagons to the flames. Desist, says God. Realize that I am God. I dominate the nations. I dominate the earth. This God of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our haven. I'm going on a long passage through the Psalms this year, and this one's out of order, but that's because it's pertinent to this particular day. But let me lead up to that. I should point out that everything was really a mistake. Martin Luther did not intend to start a Reformation. He was just a professor with a few thoughts he wanted to be debated among other professors at various universities. And any of us who've been to university know you go to the bulletin board to hang up the notice of the meeting you want to call. And so he went down to the church. No one knows exactly which one. They think it's the main church in Wittenberg. And he posted an invitation to have a debate and posted 95 ideas he thought were worth talking about, the so-called theses. He didn't mean to start a revolution. He really did not. Shakespeare, over a century later, would write that some are born great and some achieve greatness and some have greatness thrust upon them. Well, Luther had greatness thrust upon him. He did not know what he was up to. We did not know what would happen. But I would say he achieved a certain greatness as well. It should be said that he, like Isaac Newton, stood upon the shoulders of giants. Before him came Jan Hus in Prague, speaking very much the same language as Martin Luther. The church belongs to the people. They should worship in their own language. They should share the Eucharist amongst themselves, not just watch the priests do it. They should have it their way. John Wycliffe in England insisted on translating the Bible into English, which was against the law. Now, perhaps Luther was feeling some of those oats himself. But in all honesty, he was no firebrand. He wasn't whipping up the crowd. He just wanted to have a debate. But sometimes the times are not debating times. The Roman Church read his theses and said, "This guy is dangerous." Now, you've heard that phrase that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The church at that time saw all dissent as a nail, as a danger. They considered Luther dangerous. And I don't know about you, but when something is dangerous, I want to look at it twice. I'm intrigued now. The church had the ironic effect of making him probably more important than he wanted to be by treating him as a danger. And so people came to listen to him preach. What's this dangerous fellow talking about? And before he knew it, people were on fire. The Protestant Reformation, which began, at least officially, 500 years ago, this October 31st, was in some ways like that fire that just consumed 3,000 homes in Sonoma County. It only took one match. Luther didn't know he was striking a match in a very dry and hot climate, but he did, and it burned for 130 years. The Reformation was not just Martin Luther hanging up theses, not just the Roman Church holding courts. It wasn't just being excommunicated. It wasn't just being de-transubstantiated, what the gentlemen were telling you about. It was also war. The Peasants' War, the 30 Years' War. And at the end, 6 million people were dead in the wars of religion. It came to an end in 1648. That's when people say that's the end of the Reformation, and probably because they were too tired and exhausted to do any more. 6 million people dead. It was called the Peace of Westphalia. I'm sure you know about it and read about it on a regular basis. Actually, it was a momentous occasion, and you should know about it. Dozens of warring parties finally agreed to put down their weapons, to stop killing each other, to let bygones be bygones, and like punch-drunk fighters decided they were too tired to keep hitting each other. And the reason it matters to you is that from that peace, those treaties signed there in Westphalia in 1648, came the whole notion of national sovereignty. That every nation was entitled to its own borders. And no nation was entitled to go prowling into the middle of it. That each nation should give liberty of religion to those within it, at least privately. That diplomacy should be the means of international cooperation, not war. In other words, we still live in the world created by the Peace of Westphalia, which was itself created by the Reformation. It's 500 years ago, and yet we are still living inside the world that happened then. This is not history, it is reality. As I believe it was Faulkner who said of the Civil War, the past is not only not dead, it's not even past. Martin Luther's act on October 31st, 1517, barely happened yesterday as far as our society is concerned. My point, though, this morning, is that we should look at Mr. Luther with more interest even from this distance. We are not Lutherans. We are not even confessing Christians. But his experience is germane to ours today. And as I looked at that story, I found that he beset on the left by radical reformers who wanted to change everything, and beset on the right by the church that wanted to kill him outright, felt himself rather besieged. He felt threatened, and well, he should. He was under excommunication. He was outlawed, and in fact, the church had said anyone who kills Luther would not be guilty of the sin of murder. Wow. And so he turned to the Scriptures, which he held to be the only truth he could hold on to, and found Psalm 46. God is our refuge and stronghold, a very help in trouble. Therefore we are not afraid, though the earth reels, though mountains topple into the sea, the waters rage and foam. Well, it was in Latin. I can't give it to you in that. But he wanted the people to share his knowledge of the Scripture. So he rewrote the Scripture in German so ordinary people could read it. And then he rewrote the Psalms in particular so they could be sung. He even wrote the music for a number of them. And one of his most famous, from that very Psalm 46, is the one that goes, Ein Festburg ist unser Gott. The trouble is that's German, and we don't speak German in this house. And so when American Lutherans wanted to start singing that, they needed an English translation. There were several. But here's my fun story of the day. It was a professor of German languages at Harvard, a Unitarian minister, in fact, who created the translation most of us know. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. So when Lutherans and Methodists stand up to sing Luther's song, they're singing Unitarian words. And his name was Fred, and you gotta love that. I'll never achieve that kind of fame, I'll tell you. And we will sing that in a few minutes, and it is in our hymn book, in fact, because that is our contribution as a liberal church. All of us liberals kind of hang together, you know. And we'll enjoy it, although it's a little bit old-fashioned, but then again, it is 150 years old. But here's the funny part. The word fortress is all wrong. It's not the right word, really. It works. The German Burg sounds like a fortress, but it really means refuge, a safe place, a place you can go and not be under threat. Yeah, you can take refuge in a fortress, but there are other places. And that distinction really matters. In my walk through the Psalms this year, I've paused out of order because I think it's worth looking at this psalm as a spiritual lesson, as a moral lesson. Let's remember that in the 16th century, remember, Martin Luther was beset on all sides. He was looking for a little refuge. But he was not alone. If you lived in 16th century Europe, your chances of actually surviving childhood were minuscule. Your chances of perishing of diseases were much higher. Your chances of being hungry were astronomical. People lived much more precarious lives. Sometimes people want to say, I'd like to live in olden times. Not me. I want a place where I can get a flu shot, where I can get fed, where I can get warm. And let's remember, the Psalms themselves were written 2,000 years before that, when it was even less certain. I think we should remember how precarious life really is. That we are living in refuges, in our homes, in our clothes, in this beautiful church, in this lovely city, in a nation that is wonderfully calm and peaceful compared to many other nations on earth. We live surrounded by refuges, unlike the people who wrote the psalm, unlike Luther, for whom hope in God was about as good as one could get. In those days, that was a real hope. Back then, when Luther was alive, one could find refuge from time to time in a monastery. You've seen all the folk tales, people treading through the snow, knocking on doors and being taken in. But in fact, it was true. A monastery was a place of hospitality. They took in strangers, at least for a few days. In fact, when I was making my pilgrimage walk from the city of Winchester, England to Canterbury, I stopped at virtually every church I ran into, and it was a path that went from church to church to church. Each of them, at one point, an actual sanctuary, a refuge. Because once you're inside in medieval times, you were safe from soldiers. You were safe from criminals. And in some of them, to this day, preserving an older custom, a pilgrim arriving would find, I found, pitchers of water, pieces of bread, continuing the tradition of giving the wayfarer nourishment on their way through the land. And 1,000 years ago, for a pilgrim going from Winchester to Canterbury, that might be the only food they'd get in a single day, because there would be very little between villages. And believe me, it rains plenty in England, and I stood inside a number of churches until the clouds at least let up. I had a moment of refuge myself. Refuge is a place of safety, but there is a sinister side to this that I need to lift up today. I'm familiar, and you are all familiar with that phrase, patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels. That's a sinister use of the word refuge. That's Samuel Johnson, by the way, an 18th century humorist in England. And what he meant, at least as far as I can tell, is that there are people who will wrap themselves in the flag to hide their sins. After the American Civil War, politicians, notably Republicans at the time, would do something called waving the bloody shirt. Anyone know that phrase? It meant that when things were going badly, the Republicans would say, well, we must honor our Civil War dead. Vote for me. They would wave the bloody shirt of the Civil War, and people would vote for them. That's a poor refuge, because it's used to hide from those who are seeking to expose you. But people do it all the time. They take refuge in patriotism. They take refuge in church. They take refuge in places where they cannot be uncovered. And there is yet another sinister, even more deeply troubling aspect of refuge, and that involves that word fortress. Have you heard the term Fortress America? It was coined generations ago during our last isolationist period, when people were saying, pick up the drawbridges, fill them out, let no one else in. We've done that more than once, by the way. Just look back to No Irish Need Apply. Look back to the Chinese Exclusionary Acts. Look back barely a year. I'm reading a book, though, that tells me we didn't just do it to the outsider. Richard Rothstein's book is called The Color of Law, and it details in constant numbing and perpetual detail, page after page, the conscious and legal effort to create segregated housing in America's cities. Not that it just happened, it happened on purpose, in order to preserve property values, in order to prevent people of color from living in your neighborhood. Laws, zoning restrictions, redlining, even public housing during the New Deal was all erected, created, and maintained legally to keep people of color over there and white people over there, and presumably a factory in between. We like keeping them out, whoever they are. And in turbulent times, they is anyone who looks different than me. And that's a sad commentary, and we know it's a fact. We know it's an almost universal fact, and yet it is so inconsistent with the dream of America that it looks galling and is shameful. Sarah Polakov-Saransky wrote in the New York Times of October 15th that far-right leaders are correct that immigration creates problems. What they miss is that they are the problem. The greatest threat does not come from immigrants and refugees, but from the backlash against those who exploit the fear of outsiders. They are taking refuge in their patriotism to prevent those who need refuge from the safety they actually need. During the Great Depression, President Roosevelt, in his first inaugural, famously said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He was right then, and he is right now. Because when we are afraid, when we take refuge in politics, when we take refuge in patriotism, when we take refuge in race and religion, in land and language and blood and soil, brash men, and I do mean men, boast of taking the country back from people who never had it. Racists, nationalists, Christian dominionists, anti-Semites, anti-Muslimists, people who wouldn't get along with each other, suddenly are in cahoots to keep all those other people out. And they concoct a demonic brew that when the heat on the stove goes up, threatens to cook and cook and cook. The answer, though, is not Antifa. It isn't just angry protests, though they do have their place. The answer is turning down the heat of fear so the ingredients can't cook. I'm absolutely convinced that no one wants to be afraid. Do you enjoy fear? I don't. I'm convinced that people don't like being cynical. They would rather be hopeful. I am absolutely convinced that people would rather not be enraged. People would rather trust. They would rather hope. They would rather reason if we give them reason to do those things. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Therefore, we are not afraid though the earth reels. Back to Psalm 46. Nations rage, kingdoms topple. You can see why Luther grabbed on to that psalm. It asked him to look beyond his fear to something larger, greater, more substantial, something worth hoping for. Legend says that when soldiers from the Lutheran countries went to battle, they had Ein Fest Burg on their lips as they marched into battle. Another legend says that when Luther went to the Diet of Worms, he sang that song with his friends. We all know how bracing a song can be. How many of you know your old college fight song? How it gives you a sense of confidence, strength, of unity. What does that mean? Well, in the book of Proverbs, another ancient source, it says, without vision, the people perish. Back in the 16th century, the words of that hymn, that promise, however ephemeral, that there was something larger they could live upon, they could depend on. That promise was a vision of a world larger than their own. One beyond fear, one that made anger unnecessary. We can't do that anymore. We're not Luther, we're not the 16th century, we're not even sure there's God out there to depend on, but we do have something we can look back to, our psalm, our refuge. And it was written on an April evening in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968 when Martin Luther King spoke in public for the last time. Now you must know he got his name Martin Luther King Jr. from his father Martin Luther King Sr., who took that name himself. He was born Michael Martin Luther King Sr. But he went to Germany and experienced Luther firsthand and changed his name so he could live up to the great reformer's ideal and pass that along to his son. So it is not just a coincidence that Martin Luther King Jr. stands as our own Martin Luther in our society. I need you to know that as he's standing there in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968. In a moment as firm as Martin Luther's, when he told people, I don't know what will happen now. That's Dr. King. We've got some difficult days ahead. It could be 16th century Germany. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. You have heard that speech. And when you hear it, do you not tingle at the thought of it? Do you not hear the woman in the crowd who shouted when she said that? I've seen the promised land. Dr. King had a vision, a deep moral vision of America, that it could be what it said it wanted to be. That it could be that nation. That it didn't have to be a promise, it could be a reality. He believed in it, despite being arrested time and time again, despite all the reasons to doubt it. He believed that America could be America. And that's what allowed him to overcome his fear. Can we allow that to overcome ours? Dr. King said elsewhere, I've decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I've decided to stick with America because anything else is too great a burden to lose. Do you understand what I'm saying? We have to choose to believe in the things that matter to us. They are not automatic. We don't get them on purpose. We have to make the decision to believe. We are a nation that has lost our vision, I think, our vision of who we are and what we are. We're disconnected from ourselves, from our communities, from our sense of unity as a people. And the vision of Dr. King, which was, in fact, the vision of the founders and framers, flawed that they were. That same vision that drew millions across the oceans, that sent millions across empty land, that even those who were displaced from their ancestral homes will fight and die for and believe in. That vision is what we have to choose to believe. It will not happen just because it's on a piece of paper. We must make it so. And that is how to overcome fear. To choose hope. Let America be America again, wrote Langston Hughes, a gay black man who never saw the advantages that his and his descendants now know. Let America be America again, the land that never has been yet and yet must be. Can you believe that? Can you live that? If you can, then the fear goes away. If you can, then the cynicism evaporates. If you can, the anger withers. So that's the challenge of our day, to believe that America can be America again, that it can be a refuge for all who need it, no matter whether they look like you and me or not. This is a daunting task. It is laborious and long. But I have decided to stick with love, because the labor of love is a smaller burden than the burden of hate. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer.